Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study. We're going to continue looking at some of the things that Stephen talked about yesterday. He had brought up dealing with, I guess, the chronology. It was the chronology of Egypt, but we touched on Belshazzar. And so I kind of wanted to tie up some loose ends about Belshazzar and his reign. But before we do that, let's open with the word of prayer. And dear gracious Heavenly Father, we once again invite your presence as we open your word. We're thankful, Lord, that we can come together this morning and that we can continue to look at the chronology of the Bible and that we can see its relevance. One is in affirming that this is indeed your word, and also encouraging us in the prophecies that we understand as Seventh-day Adventists. So we just pray, Lord, that you can be with us now through your Spirit, that you can guide and direct in this study. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so you see here in front of you a chart. This chart I made back in 2018, I believe, when Heidi and I were in Arkansas. So I had worked out a lot of this stuff then, trying to understand when Belshazzar came to the throne. So we had noted, and the statement is in manuscript releases. So let me see if I bring this up here. I'll read this statement. I'll put it on the screen. Now there's a statement also in Prophets and Kings, but it doesn't mention the 15 years of age. Right, so this one does. So manuscript release number 823, it's letter 51A, 1897, pages 3 to 4, entitled To Dear Friends, July 8, 1897. And then, of course, it's similar in Prophets and Kings, though there's some left out. And then 10 manuscript releases, page 307.1. Admitted to a share of kingly authority and power at 15 years of age, Belshazzar gloried in his power and lifted his heart against the God of heaven. He despised the one who is above all rulers and general of all the armies of heaven. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. The profane orgies of royal mirth were attended by men of genius and education, by masters of architecture. On this occasion, there was music and banqueting and wine drinking. Decorated women with their enchantments were among the revelers, exalted by wine and blinded by delusion. The king himself took the lead in the riotous blasphemy. His reason was gone, and his lower impulses and passions were in the ascendancy. So we have this statement of when he began to co-reign. Now, there's another statement, which I should have had here. Do you happen to know where that statement is, Stephen? Of the one about he witnessed? Let's see here.
Yeah, I think that would be in Prophets and Kings.
Yeah, I think it's in Prophets and King. What would be the wording of it?
Maybe if you put in Queen and then Belshazzar.
Queen?
Queen, yes.
Okay. So there's Bible Echo and then youth instructor. Well, anyway, I'll read this one. There was in the palace a woman who was wiser than them all, the queen of Belshazzar's grandfather. So this would then be the one that was married to Nebuchadnezzar's was Adad-Gupi. So not Nocretis or Nocris or whatever her name is, which some people assume. In this emergency, she addressed the king in language that sent a ray of light into the darkness. So king, live forever, she said. Let not thy thoughts trouble thee, nor let thy countenance be changed. There's a man in thy kingdom, in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, etc. Right. So I'm just going to have, let me see here. So there's supposed to be here where it talks about, is this, I don't see what I'm looking for. So you're saying it's in Prophets and Kings?
Yeah, what is it, the phrase again? Where the queen says that she knew, that that Belshazzar knew that he had seen Nebuchadnezzar. Well, hold on a minute, let's see.
Yeah, I should have had that one brought up. but I just brought up the one about the 15, Debbie's 15. Anyway, she says he witnessed, but she doesn't use the word witnessed. We've got prophets and kings. Anyway, yeah, if you can find it, that would be helpful. But I want to go to this chart here. Okay, where's that? Disappeared. There it is. So just to look at these, this chart again. So we got Nabopolassar. He's obviously the father of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar's wife was Adad-Gupi, however you say that. And then she's going to be the mother of Nabonidus, who is then going to be married to Nabonidus. So Belshazzar's mother is Notocris, if I would say that, Notocris. Now, if we look at this timeline, we can see that if Nebuchadnezzar, or he's going to die in 561, Evil-Merodach comes to the throne, reigns for 2 years, 559 to 561, or 561 to 559, pardon me. Then we have Nerigalasser. Now, these are not, so there's a co-regency here that happens with these kings. So who these are, there's debates about the relationships of these different kings, whether the Evil-Merodach is overthrown by like some kind of coup by Nerigalasser, or when that happens, there's just disputes about it. Now, but we're going to say that these are not the sons of Belshazzar, or of Nebuchadnezzar, right? So Belshazzar is the son of Nebuchadnezzar. Evil-Merodach is the son of Nebuchadnezzar, but these ones are not. So in order to establish their throne, there are different options. One is they could just take over the kingdom, kill Belshazzar, right? Or they could have a co-regency. Now, these were not just people that came out of nowhere. They would have been people that were powerful within the court. It could be that Evil-Merodach was going in a direction that they didn't want to go. There's just little we know about the politics that was going on. So historians have quite varying theories about this. And so there's a lot of uncertainty. What we know from the Bible, the Spirit of Prophecy, and from Xenophon, and the thing that what we can get from the Babylonian Chronicles, is the most likely scenario is that Nabonidus would have been some high official under Nebuchadnezzar's reign. Evil-Merodach, he reigns for 2 years, and there's some kind of a coup. Nerigalasser would not be the son of Evil-Merodach, but they're going to reign for a while. 3 years for Nerigalasser, 1 year for Labasi-Marduk, and then Nabonidus ends up getting to the throne. Now, he's already been married to the daughter of Nebuchadnezzar, right? So he has status within the kingdom. So this isn't a complete overthrow of the government. It's something that happens within the government itself. So Nebuchadnezzar would have been king when Belshazzar was born, right? So Belshazzar was born. He would have been, of course, the grandson to Nebuchadnezzar through his mom Notocris, but he is also connected to Nabonidus. So Nabonidus, part of his claim to the throne is that he's married to the daughter of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, there's some people who have other theories about how some of these relationships work, but this to me seems like the most logical scenario. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, you're kind of providing a different way of thinking about this entire situation.
Different in what way?
Well, in the Bible, we are aware of Belshazzar.
Mm-hmm.
And you're adding a lot of detail as to how all of this would have worked. So it's a lot for us to consider.
Yeah. So one is we know that he's a co-regent. Nabonidus is actually the king, but he's operating as a priest. He's spends all of his time in the temple. So And we know from the historical records that Belshazzar is the one who has the authority of the king, even though he's not the actual king, right? Now, he's called king, right? You would normally call him king, but officially he's just a co-regent, right? Now, some people have the impression that Belshazzar is the direct son of Nebuchadnezzar because the Bible says that Nebuchadnezzar is his father. But we know in the Bible that you can refer to someone as your son or somebody as your father, even if there's a generation or more between those relationships, right? So that's not really a problem.
Agreed.
Yeah. Plus, we do have the fact that we have these other kings recorded in, the records, right? The ancient records. We know that these other people were king, when they were king. Now, in the 19th century, people disputed Belshazzar's existence, right? Just something made up. And, because when we see in like Ptolemy's canon, he's just going to have Nabonidus as the king. He's not even going to mention Belshazzar, right? Because Belshazzar is not the king, right? He is a co-regent. So as the archaeology came along in the later part of the 19th century and into the 20th century, they had the confirmation that Belshazzar did exist. Also, that his offer to Daniel to be the third ruler in the kingdom was consistent with the facts of history. So if you tried to say that the book of Daniel was written in the 2nd century BC, when the knowledge of Belshazzar and all of this history was lost, that would be impossible for them to have known to put into Daniel if it was written later, right? There's a number of things, obviously, in Daniel that show it was written by Daniel in his time. Persian words that are used. Definitely, it's not. If Daniel was written in the 2nd century, it'd be full of all kinds of anachronisms, like the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch was not written by Enoch, but I have lots of discussions with people about the Book of Enoch. You got a lot of African, Ethiopian Christians who believe that Enoch should be in the Bible because it's in theirs. But anyway, that's a whole other story. So then we have this situation that if Belshazzar's born in 574, and we go to our chart that we had been looking at, 343, 434. So if we go back to this chart and we look at that 7-year period that we placed here, we're going to have Belshazzar being born in 574. So, roughly about that time, sort of in connection with the end of that. That would be actually 574. That is from 574 to 573. The fall of 574 to 573 is the 49th year of the Jubilee cycle. And in the fall of 573 starts the 50th year of the Jubilee cycle. Now, having Belshazzar born at that time is rather interesting. So one of the things that when we look at these chronologies, we look at these histories, we often study them independently. We're studying about, Nebuchadnezzar and his 7 years. We don't consider when that occurred. Or we're studying about Belshazzar. We don't think about the relationship to Ezekiel. Right? We're studying Ezekiel. We don't think about what's happening in the Babylonian Empire at the time Ezekiel is writing, right? So by putting all of these things together, taking these different lines, the different prophets, the different kingdoms, and the different stories, the different prophecies, we start to see how these things align with. Now, with this chart, we only go up to, the end of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. Now, in trying to find this information regarding, because I want to deal with that, I had this, when I go to this other screen, you still just see the PowerPoint, right?
I believe so.
Okay. It's just weird doing it this way where I'm looking at stuff that you're not looking at. Let's see. Okay, let's see if I can bring this up really quickly. Because, yeah, I don't, well, let's see if I can find this here. Okay. I don't know why it's not doing what I'm asking it to do. So I'm going back to emails from like 2023. So that's what I'm trying to find, this particular email. I should have queued it up. Yeah, let's see if I can find this. Okay, well, I can't find this right now. It's not. Okay. And this is pretty technical too, because it's dealing with all these eclipses. But I'll just kind of sum it up what the claim is. So when we deal with the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, so the end of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, we're going to have him. How do I get out of this? Oh, I see what I have to do. Okay, you still can see the chart, right? So he's going to die in his 43rd year of his reign. He's going to reign 43 years. And how do I explain this? I don't think I can explain it simply, because I'd still have to go through how we deal with these eclipses and how these are dated. And that would be too technical at this point. I'll have to prepare that later. So anyway, when we're dealing with the death of Nebuchadnezzar, we're putting him somewhere close to the end of the 7 years of Daniel chapter 4, right? That has to be where it would occur. And especially since we're going to have Belshazzar be 15 in 559, right? So when Evil Merodach dies, that's when we're taking. Now, it's because he'd be like maybe 18, right? So that would make sense, him being a type of co-regent. And why would he be co-regent? Obviously, Evil Merodach is the son of Nebuchadnezzar. When he becomes king, you wouldn't put Belshazzar as co-regent with his uncle, right? Because he's just a young person. But why would they make him co-regent in 559, right? So if we go, do you understand what I'm asking?
Yes.
Okay. Because Evil Merodach is a descendant of Nebuchadnezzar, but that next guy, whatever his name is, Nigo, whatever. He's got that. I don't have the name in front of me. I can never pronounce it anyway. Nigalisser, something like that. So if they had a coup, then why would they put the 18-year-old Belshazzar as co-regent? What would be the logic?
Could it be that these other that for which he was co-regent with, that they were off campaigning somewhere?
No, I don't think that would be the reason.
All right.
So one is they're trying to provide stability to Babylon, right? If they just overthrow Babylon, then it puts Babylon in some kind of civil war. So exactly what happens to Evil Merodach, we don't know, but we know that Nabonidus is married to the daughter of Nebuchadnezzar and has a son. Now we could say, we now have a descendant. They could have just put Belshazzar on the throne, right? Because wouldn't he be heir to the throne, being the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar?
Yes.
Okay. But he's 18, so he's going to become co-regent. So it provides stability, but it seems like an odd thing. You would just think, well, he's the one who's the heir. Shouldn't he just be on the throne? But instead, you're going to have that Nergal-Lasser guy, whatever his name is. And then the other guy after him, for a year. His name starts with an L. And then you're going to have Nabonidus. He will finally end up coming to the throne. So now he is the father of Nebuchadnezzar, right? But he is not the son, the father of Belshazzar, pardon me. But he's not the son of Nebuchadnezzar, right? He's just the son-in-law. So when he comes to the throne, the daughter of Nebuchadnezzar, Notokris, she is now queen, right? And now, some people have assumed that she's the one who comes there in Daniel chapter 5, right, with the writing on the wall. But we understand it to be the wife of Nebuchadnezzar, who actually ends up being there when Babylon falls, right? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that means that here he's going to be 15 years old in 559. So if you count back from there, 14, 13. So about 12 years old when Nebuchadnezzar regains his sanity, and about 5 years old when Nebuchadnezzar becomes insane, right? So that would fit with what Ellen White says, that quote. Now, did you find that quote, Stephen, at all regarding his Belshazzar witnessing?
On the chat.
Not yet. Okay.
No, it's on the chat.
Oh, it's in the chat. Okay. Yeah. Not yet in the chat. Okay. So Belshazzar had been given many opportunities for knowing and doing the will of God. He had seen his grandfather Nebuchadnezzar banished from the society of men. He had seen the intellect in which the proud monarch gloried taken away by the one who gave it. He had seen the king driven from his kingdom and made the companion of the beasts of the field, right? So I think that he would have to be, from the age of 5 to 12, that would be something that he would have seen and witnessed and remembered, right? So that would fit. So that's why we have to put that 7 years at the end of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. Now, exactly how long from when he gains his sanity to when he dies, it's uncertain, right? But definitely, I would put it that the latest we would push that, 7 years would be into the year 562, and we wouldn't really go much earlier than that, right? So like the beginning of 562 to the middle of 562, roughly is when this would have occurred. Now what about let's see here, how do we deal with this? Now, let's go to Daniel chapter 5, or not chapter 5, chapter 4. So I know we're jumping around here, but if we go back to this one dealing with Nebuchadnezzar, when you're reading through Daniel, you don't get a sense of when this is, right? Because Daniel chapter 3, that's going to be when? Well, Daniel chapter 2, we know it's in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar. When do we place Daniel chapter 3 chronologically?
I think there's a connection then to when Zedekiah visited Babylon. Maybe like 594 or something around that.
Okay. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Can you explain what you're talking about? So Zedekiah, the king of Judah, you say he visits Babylon in 594?
I'd have to check. I have a note on it in the table of history. It mentions that when he went to Babylon.
Okay.
I think it talks about that in Jeremiah. And then the sort of scenario was, because you have all the kings sort of bowing down before the image, they were all assembled there. He probably would have been there at that their time, bowed before the image.
Okay, so that image is still there? You mean once it's made? Yeah. Okay. That's interesting.
Just let me have a search for it.
Okay. So we know it's there at least by then, but we generally would place it not long after Daniel chapter 2, right?
So I actually, I have it as 593. So potentially coinciding with the gathering of all the rulers to bow down before the image. So I have there Jeremiah 28 referenced, 1 to 17, and then 51 to 59.
Okay. So you're going to put it, yeah, so you have it in the 4th year of Zedekiah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So So from the time of Daniel chapter 2, right, with the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, it's still going to be a long time before he decides to build this image, which kind of makes sense. Why does it make sense?
Well, after the image, the dream is interpreted,
Yeah,
he's quite obedient then, in the
yeah,
sense to God. He's honoring God, but it
yeah,
takes a while for the apostasy then to slip.
yeah. And it would be something I would think I would place it at least after Jehoiachin's captivity, right? And him placing Zedekiah on the throne. Now, why would I do that? Sort of related to what you're saying. So definitely we're not going to put it right like the next year, right? Which people usually get the impression, it's just like that's the next thing he does after he says, to honor, the God of the Jews, right?
Yeah, I think Ellen White, she has some comments about that, after a while, some time before he began to sort of no longer be influenced by that dream interpretation.
Yeah, and I would think when he then takes Jehoiachin captive, puts Zedekiah on the throne, that would be part of that process in which he's, turning away from God. So that initial impression of his dream with all the things that he's doing, his activities, his wars, and then of course what happens with Judah itself would weaken that commitment that he had initially. So then when you're going to have that image about the fourth year of Zedekiah, which would fit. Now it's also, putting it into that timeline, just before, like a year before Ezekiel has his vision. So the thing that we can see is that these things are all tied together. Like often we study them, as I said before, sort of independent events, but they're playing on each other. Each of these stories is part of this harmony. So you got all these different voices, soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, these different things, but they're harmonizing with each other and they're interacting with each other. So when we get to, like what is it here? So we get to the end of Zedekiah's reign, we're going to have events that are connected with that. We're putting in the beginning of 586, we have that prophecy in Ezekiel 29. We have the date, 29 verse 17 mentioned. Let's see here. Right, so if you look here, we got that. And then we have this time in which Nebuchadnezzar is fighting against Tyre and Egypt. And then, and that you put at, we have 570, put that there. Let's see where that goes here. So we got that prophecy. We got, so I have Ezekiel 29 verse 1 and Ezekiel 29 verse 17. So this one's going to be here in 570, the last vision of Ezekiel. Not the last one in this book, but because that's going to be 40 verse 1. So you got the end of that Jubilee cycle. And so here in this history, we now have this 40 years. So when does that 40 years begin again, Stephen?
Well, I put it as the Battle of Migdol in 601.
Okay, so 601. Okay. No, but I thought we had this prophecy given while the 40 years was still continuing. You're marking that as the end of the 40 years.
I have the end of that Nebuchadnezzar's death marks the end.
Right. Yeah, so 561. Okay, I'm going backwards. I don't know why. Yeah, so 601 way over. Okay. Yeah, so that's going to be here. 601.
You also have Darius Mede being born at that year as well.
In what year?
601.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because he's how old when Babylon falls?
62.
63? Okay.
62.
Or 62. Okay, so 62. So 62 years old. Yeah, so 62. yeah, so you take 2 from, okay, that makes sense. So that would be the 599, and then you take 6 years from there, gives you 539. Okay, yeah, so we have all of these different things happening, right, that we have to keep in our mind, that they interact with each other. So then we could see that this is really the only place that we can place those 7 years, based on everything that we have. But we see that there's a lot happening. And so we have these prophecies against Tyre, prophecies against Egypt. We have Ezekiel's history, of course. And then after Ezekiel's prophesying is all over, then we're going to see that this prophecy in Daniel chapter 4 is of the 7 years is going to be fulfilled. And then we're going to have the end of the 36 years of Jehoiachin's captivity. So this isn't the best way to look at this history as far as like visualizing it, right? This is how we typically do it. Whoops. Right? This is kind of like what Gerard Gerteau does, except his goes vertical. I'm doing it horizontal. Lots of books do it horizontal. But you can see the difficulty of all of these events, putting them together on a single line, because they just interlock with each other. These are wheels within wheels. So it must be a better way of doing it. But I like what Stephen does in Table of History with the different charts. I think that's really good. And then just the simple lines with the spans breaking down each different event. But we can see that these all fit together. Now, when we deal, because you brought up Darius the Mede, I mean, there's so much history in connection with the fall of Babylon. So we know the 70 years begin with Daniel being taken captive. So that's going to be in 607. 6 years later, we're going to have the birth of Darius the Mede. Now, does anybody know his name in history?
Something like Psycho Xerxes or something.
Yeah. So how you actually Psycho Xerxes? Let me see here. Okay. I want you on the screen. Am I showing you the Bible or let me see here, or the chart? I'm showing you the chart, right? That's what you see, people?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's just with one screen, I can't see what I'm showing you. Okay. So, the guy's name is, I have it here. Where did it go? Yeah. So it's in this book. So maybe I should just bring that up. No, that's going to be too hard. There's a book by a guy named Anderson, and it's called Darius the Mede, a Reappraisal. And so he goes through and shows that most historians, they trust Herodotus. Herodotus, his history is not very reliable of the history of the Persians. He's a Greek. And so is Xenophon. But Xenophon's history seems to be more accurate. It does show that when Babylon falls, that the king who is king is not the first ruler in the kingdom, that he's the second ruler. It has some of that information. Doesn't give his name. So we have Xerxes, is how I say it. But it's probably like Xerxes. So he shows that Xenophon's understanding of that history is accurate. And where, when you look at Herodotus, he has this whole fantastical story about how Cyrus comes in and there's this huge war and everything. Where what we see in the Nabonidus Chronicle is consistent with the book of Daniel, plus with Xenophon. So that's why we have support for this Xerxes II, however you say his name. He is the uncle of Cyrus. So when he dies, Cyrus becomes the Persian Empire, and this is an agreement that they have. So the Persian Empire becomes the main empire, of the Medo-Persian kingdom, and that would fit with Daniel's vision of Daniel chapter 8. Okay, so any questions about that? I could give you more information if you wanted it.
So I think why Herodotus is preferred is because I think they say his alliance with this Cyrus cylinder. There was this here cylinder found, and they say that's more aligning with Herodotus.
Okay, you have to repeat that. So you're saying who does what?
There was like a cylinder found called, I think it's called the Cyrus cylinder.
Yeah.
It's all cuneiform. There, the history described in that seems to align more with Herodotus.
Yeah, because Cyrus is going in the Cyrus cylinder. Let me see here. I'll look this up quickly. Okay, so I'll tell you what the Cyrus cylinder says. So it's a small cuneiform clay barrel discovered in 1879. So while the barrel shape is typical of its dedicatory foundation deposit, specifically the rebuilding of Babylon's inner wall, it also functioned as a highly circulated imperial decree and propaganda text. It's universally recognized by scholars as a classic propaganda piece produced by Cyrus or his officials to manipulate public opinion and legitimize his rule over Babylon. The text justifies Cyrus' conquest by claiming the Babylonian god Marduk appointed Cyrus to protect the gods from the impious acts of Nabonidus. It asserts that Marduk delivered Babylon and Nabonidus to Cyrus, and that Babylonian people overjoyed at being liberated, and that the Babylonian people overjoyed at being liberated from Nabonidus' oppressive rule. It boasts that the Medo-Persian army entered Babylon without battle or combat, achieving a bloodless conquest. So this would agree, I think, with the Bible, right? So historical distortions here. So obviously it doesn't mention Belshazzar, right? So that would align with Herodotus's view. So it's just basically between Cyrus and Nabonidus is what's in there. So nothing about Belshazzar. Now, part of that is because Belshazzar was religiously orthodox, right? And so now we know that Nabonidus was a little bit odd, right? So that could be part of what it was about. Now, so we have here the diverting of the river as corroborated by Xenophon and Daniel is in this, but so so there's different accounts. So this one, the Cyrus cylinder, differs from Nabonidus's account. So I think it would be more in line with Xenophon's. Yeah, so also it exalts Cyrus alone as the great conquering king, ignoring the documented co-regencies of Cambyses and Darius the Mede, right? Where in Xenophon's account, he acknowledges Darius the Mede, just calling him Cyaxares, right? So that propaganda of Cyrus doesn't agree with the Nabonidus Chronicle. So there's some differences there. So does that make sense? I mean, it's probably hard to keep track of all of this. I don't even remember all of it all the time. I go over it every once in a while. But
Google AI says that Herodotus contradicts the cylinder, detailing a fierce military resistance where Cyrus had to three of these.
Right. Yeah. So he contradicts where Xenophon agrees with the cylinder in that sense. But there's still things in the cylinder itself that don't agree with the Bible, like taking away, not having the co-regency. So now some people think it also says that, there was no battle. But I think that sort of fits. I mean, it's maybe an exaggeration, but we know in the Bible prophecy, I will open before you the two leaved gates, and the gate shall not be shut, right? So God does allow Cyrus's army, even though Cyrus personally isn't running the army. That's going to be another guy. But just to go into Babylon without a battle. But, there's still going to be a battle, right? Just not a huge battle. So he kind of downplays it, sort of a little bit like Donald Trump, when he tells you what happened. It's not exactly what happened. He exaggerates, but I guess that's what kings do, right? Okay. Any other thoughts about that? So, I mean, I probably could put some of this information on this chart. What I need to do is another chart just dealing with this latter part going up to the Babylonian captivity. But right now, our purpose in this study is we're really addressing Second Kings. Now, what should we do about this chronology of the kings of Israel? So we've completed the kings of Israel. So we would be moving then into Ezra. Okay, so what should we do as far as how we move this study ahead? Now, do we need to go back, or do we complete Ezra? Right? You understand what I'm asking? Because we're studying the kingdom of Israel. Now, the kingdom of Israel in our lines, how do we haven't drawn all the lines for these kings, right? We haven't gone through these chapters in detail. We dealt with the chronology. So we could go ahead with the chronology later on, or we can come back to this later stuff, the fall of Babylon, later. Now, we have studied that because when we studied Daniel's last vision, we did go through quite a bit of detail dealing with this story of Ezra, right? So we've dealt with the Persian kings. So how do you guys want to deal with this? How do you want to proceed as far as where we're studying? Because I think that we should go back over Second Kings, not just Second Kings, but First Kings and Second Kings and Samuel maybe, and try to address the underlying stories as we did, like going through the Hebrew, like in doing this chronology, particularly once we got to Second Kings, dealing with the chronology of Judah and Israel, and then finally the end of Judah. We've left out some of the stories, especially in the latter part of Second. We haven't looked at what they would represent symbolically, and we did go through, the prophecy of Isaiah 7 and 8 and how that relates. So dealing with this civil war during the reign of Hoshea and Hezekiah. So we addressed that. So we got the fall of ancient Israel. And then we have just from Hezekiah to Manasseh. So we dealt with the last 7 kings of Judah, from Manasseh to Zedekiah. So what do we do?
I think going back is the more prudent decision.
Okay, so how far back do we go? Do we go back to, because in dealing with Manasseh, I think we covered Manasseh in prophetically and symbolically pretty clearly, right? So then we would have this part dealing with Josiah. We haven't drawn these on a line. We have the chronology, but we haven't drawn these on a line, right?
Agreed.
So I'm not quite sure how to proceed in this because, I know about the chronology and we've gone through this. But if we're going to look at like the Hebrew numbers or look at the stories as symbols, one thing that we did understand is that Josiah typifies Donald Trump, right? We figured that out before, right? That is that there's a reform that's supposed to go on in Josiah. So maybe we need to take a deeper look at Josiah and the failure of the reform of Josiah. What do you think about that? How does the finding of the book of the law, how does the Passover fit with our history?
I think that makes logical sense.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe just even this reading about Josiah here. Well, let's read this again. So we've gone through this before. We've dealt with the chronology of it. But let's just take a look at the story sort of with fresh eyes. Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 31 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Jedidah, and the daughter of Adiah, of Boscath. And he did that which was right in the sight of the Lord and walked in all the way of
Are you
David
not
his father.
sharing?
What's that? I'm not sharing? Oh, sorry. It's the problem with doing it on one screen. Can't see what I'm sharing. Okay. He walked in the way of David his father and turned not aside to the right hand or to the left. So this is a pretty typical way of writing about, like it's a formulaic, right? Verse 2, right? He does what's right, walked in the way of David his father, turned not aside to the right hand or the left. But is there any symbolism in here that we could draw on? Now we know Josiah is 8 here, as far as that's what they state, but we understand that it has to do when so he's 8 years old. Now he's under, what is he under? Like, he's not actually ruling, right? It's not going to be until the 18th year of King Josiah that we're going to have that Josiah repairs the temple. So here, remember when we go to Second Chronicles, I always forget which chapter. There it is, 34. Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign. He reigned in Jerusalem 130 years. He did that which was right in the sight of the Lord. So it says exactly the same thing. For in the 8th year of his reign, while he was yet young. So if he's 8 when he begins to reign, and he's in his 8th year, he began to seek after God, the God of David, his father, right? So he's going to be 16. And then in his 12th year, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem from the high places and the groves. So how old is he in his 12th year? He'd be 20, right? So he's going to be 20 years old. None of that is in Second Kings. So Second Kings, they're just going to give you, wherever it is, right? They're just going to give you, chapter, there it is, 22. They're just going to go right to the 18th year of King Josiah. So they're going to skip his 12th year. They're going to skip his 8th year. Now, is there anything about this 8, 12, 18th that we could draw from as symbols?
8, 18, 12. Is that what you're saying?
Well, we got he's 8 when he begins to reign. Then we have his 8th year, his 12th year, and his 18th, right? So it says he's 8 years old when he begins to reign. In his 8th year of his reign, he begins to seek God. In the 12th year, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem from the high places. And then in his 18th year is when he's going to have, when he had purged the land, and then you're going to have this book of the law found, right? So we have this progression. Now we know it's going to be in his 13th year of his reign that Jeremiah is going to begin prophesying, and we also mark the fulfillment of the prophecy of Josiah in his 13th year of his reign. So when he's 21. So we have all of this chronological information. Can we use it symbolically? Does it have some kind of structure? Now, the thing that I find interesting too is with Jehoiachin, he's going to be anointed when he's 8 and 18. So we have that 8 and 18 symbol in both of these kings, Jehoiachin and Josiah.
Well, as you're asking the question, I'm looking at the passage of time, with 8 being basically being the anchor. You add to that 4, 5, and 10, and you have those different ages of Josiah.
Okay, so you're going to have, okay, explain it, go through each one.
All right. He becomes king in his 8th year.
Yeah.
In his 12th year, he begins to tear down the high places.
Yeah. So when he's in his 8th year of his reign, he begins to follow God.
Right.
Right. So that's when he's 16. In his 12th year of his reign, he's going to be 20.
Okay. I thought it was that he was 12.
No, it's 12th year of his reign.
Okay.
Not
I
12
stand
years
corrected. I stand corrected.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I know it gets a bit confusing, but when you look at the text.
So then, Then what we're saying is he was 8, 20, 21, and 36.
Yeah. So he's going to be 8 years old, 16, 20, and 21. I'm not quite sure what you're doing. So if you look at it here, because I'm showing you the Bible, right? Second
Right.
Chronicles 13.
8.
So he's 8 years old when he begins to reign. In the 8th year, he begins to seek God, right? So that means he's 16,
Right. Okay.
right? And then it says, and in the 12th year, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem. So obviously that's the 12th year of his reign. It doesn't say the 12th year of his reign, but it'd be the 12th year of his reign. So that means he's 20.
Correct. And that means that Jeremiah begins to preach. The spirit of prophecy is brought back to him when he's 21.
21, yeah. And then he's going to be in his 18th year of his reign.
Okay.
He's going to be 26,
Right.
right? So he's going to be 26 when they find the book of the law.
Okay.
Okay, so those numbers are interesting. Now, there was something here so when we deal with this 8, right? So we know we have 8, the 8 days and the 8 days in when Hezekiah has the priests and the Levites cleansing the temple. 8 is a symbol of the resurrection. So we have the number 8 here twice. The 8 years old and the 8th year of his reign. So we got the 16 there with the 2 8s. Then we have the 4, which gives us the 20. And then we have, it's the 12, but you understand what I mean. There's 4 more years to give us the 12th year of his reign. And then we got 6 more with the 18th year of his reign. Yeah, I want to touch on one other thing that I've been thinking about. Maybe this might be related, but let me go here back to this chart. So this is not talking about Josiah per se. One thing I added to the chart that I didn't show you guys, when we count Jehoiachin's reign, it's going to go from Jehoiachin's captivity, pardon me. It's going to go from March 16th, 597 to March 31st, 561, right? So let's zoom in a bit. Right. So we know from ABC 5, the 12th day of the second day of the 12th month, that's when his captivity in a sense starts, and then it's going to end when he's released from prison by evil Merodach. And that's going to be 13,164 days. Now, that number is divisible by 4 to be 3,291 days. Now, what is 3,291 days? Does anybody know where we had that number? Nobody knows?
Okay, from the chat, it was being said that was 391 and a half.
Okay, so symbolizes that. Yeah. So it has all the digits of 391.5. It's the period of time from the mine date 13/00/00 to December 25th, 2021. So it's that 7777 chiasm. And it's basically a period of 9 years and 4 days, right? December 21st to December 25th, right? But I thought this was interesting that this period of the captivity, well, it's 4 times 36, right? But you have basically 36 years, and to go from the 16th to the 31st of March is 15 days, right? So you got that kind of matching. So does that make sense to people? Because you go from March 16th to March 31st. So that's going to be 36 years and 15 days. And if you take this period and you divide it by 4, you get a period of 9 years and 3.75 days to be exact. But in the case of that structure, from the mine date to the end of the 777 chiasm is 3,291 days. So anyway, there's some things that we're going to have to consider and look at. Okay. So I'm going to have to kind of get prepared for this to figure out what we're going to do. So anyway, any final thoughts? I'm just going to close early here. I think we kind of know where we need to go, and I'm not certain about tomorrow. I'll know more in a little while whether I'll be able to be here tomorrow or not, but we'll see. Okay. Okay. Well, let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for the time that we've had this morning. Again, just ask for your presence throughout this day, that we can contemplate the things that you are seeking to teach us. We ask for your angels to watch over each one. Bring us together again to study your word is our prayer. In Jesus' name.